Hey, welcome back to another episode of Capturing the Intangibles. Today we wanted to dive into the evolving and growing space of Industry 4.0 to see if we could land on a definition, but more importantly, how can it be used more broadly as a technology mindset across industries? Or can it? Let's discuss. Hey guys, welcome into another episode of Capturing the Intangibles. It's good to see you guys. It's pretty weird. The U.S. has started to open up a bit. Last week was my first week of official business travel and going through the airport, staying in a hotel. Super weird after 14 months of not doing anything.
Wow.
So who knows, Massimo, if we could get Europe in order, maybe we could do one of these things in person all together. That would be pretty nice, right?
Yeah, that would be really nice. But I'm driving down to Italy tomorrow. So, hey, that's going to be my first travel again since August last year. So that will be interesting.
I've got nowhere to go, guys.
Driving down to Italy, Massimo, what are you having to do to actually get down there? Are you having to show a vaccination card? Do you have to get tested or what?
Actually, I got fully vaccinated as well, but apparently Europe can get, agreeing what will be the good rules to travel inside Europe. So some nations accept the vaccination. Some nations said, no, you need also to have a COVID test, last 48 hours. So I had to do a COVID test this morning. It has to be 48 hours, so I can drive down tomorrow to Italy. And when I travel back, then people said you always can go home, even if you don't have a test. But they will gonna ask you a test at the borders, either in Switzerland or in Germany or in Italy. I don't want this trouble, so I'm gonna get a rapid test in Italy as well, and then I can, travel back worry-free as well.
What's the latest on maybe easing some of those restrictions? Is there any end in sight in the short term? Or?
Yeah, they're saying that by 15 June we should get an app. And in this app in Europe, you can travel through Europe and the app will say if you are vaccinated or you had a recent test or you had a recent COVID. So you have this green status. You can travel free through the entire Europe. Hopefully in the US, to the US as well.
Yeah, I haven't heard anything like that for us, Mike. Have you?
No, nothing like that. But I know that actually, full credit, right? America's actually done a pretty good job with getting percentage-wise a large portion of the population vaccinated. Same thing with the UK. Starting to roll out the rest of the world as well. But even in Philadelphia, a lot of the shops are starting to pull down signs saying that you need masks to come in. So, it almost feels weird to see people's faces again. Like I've met all my neighbors for the second time.
Yeah.
It's super interesting. And now we're dealing with, let's not get into any debates on that because we all know that there's different sides of the equation to how many microchips are in this thing. But anyways,
that's innovation, by the way. That is innovation.
That is innovation. So let's talk a bit about Industry 4.0 today. It's something that even this morning we were on a call all together of what are our requirements that we're seeing in the market? How can we facilitate a lot of these different, let's call it integrations with different data sources in the IoT space? Is that what kind of defines what Industry 4.0 is? Is it some sort of automation? Is it something downstream back to the ground to stop machinery? What's the liability there? It's a massive space, right?
It is.
So maybe let's start there. What does Industry 4.0 mean to you? And Mike, let's start with you today.
What does Industry 4.0 mean to me? It's been a term that's been around for a few years now. So there's a lot of connotations of what it implicitly means, and I think now the market is actually starting to catch up here. Hardware technology and hardware vendors are starting to catch up here, but I think it's really about synthesizing this whole connected enterprise, right? So when you actually look at, okay, we all work in a back office, and a lot of the people that we work with at customer sites, their CIOs, their Office of IT, those people are working in cubicles, but they're managing businesses that are managed on the shop floor, right? They're manufacturing, they're building things, they're transporting, they're distributing things, and that means that there's equipment, there's belts, there's trucks, there's assets, there's all sorts of things that it takes to bring raw material to market as a finished product or a value-add product. And when you start to look at all the different parts and componentry of what your business is in the business of doing, a lot of that is really disconnected today. You have very little visibility. So, the classical IoT value proposition is, well, if you have more of your devices, things like temperature sensors or even truck monitors, speed monitors, that sort of thing, feeding information back to some sort of central holding area, you can start to make decisions about things like, when do we need to bring in this asset for repair, take that offline, that sort of thing. So we're talking about more intelligent maintenance. But I think when we talk about Industry 4.0, it is hyperscaling this out to really come out the gate with industrial manufacturing, machinery, and everything all interconnected, and having that ability to tell everyone and put out pulses of information about what's going on in that operational frame of time, and actually let people make decisions off of what should be happening in a greater control plane that manages the entire enterprise. That's a very, very long-winded, fancy way of saying everything is connected, but I think it's to a degree that we've never really seen before, and very, very few enterprises have had the benefit or opportunity to really engage in. But we're seeing those costs drive way, way down on the hardware side, and we're seeing the interest level rise up to correspond with that of how do we actually start operationalizing this. So it's really connected enterprise, but to a degree that I wish I had a better way of describing it, of being able to drive intelligence through information.
Yeah, it almost sounds like you're describing a theme. It's not one package, right? So there's no blue check mark for Industry 4.0 really. But Massimo, are you seeing sort of the same thing? Is it about any and all technologies that give you better visibility on your operations and from a manufacturing perspective, or could this be even more broad than even manufacturing?
Yeah, I agree with Mike was saying. I would add that my summary would be, it's the next step of, again, another being better optimized, so optimization and automation, right? That's maybe on the floor, in the facility, and the other thing is the biggest opportunity I think with Industry 4.0 is really to blend and mesh the world of the data generated by machine with the data that is generated by business systems, right? So that opportunity to have that meshing up and connecting all this data, I think Mike was calling connected enterprise, but the detail behind what Mike, I think you were meaning, is really connecting this world of data together and making better optimization, better automation, and better decision and as well, right? So that's to me the best definition. Have we as industry done anything yet already with Industry 4.0? That is the question mark, I would say, because I don't see from the execution side yet, a lot of, success stories, to be honest.
I think you see we're in that stage where the market, when you have a very, very mature market, then customers have to make a decision about, do I build something or do I buy something? When you look at Sears back in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, they were this enormous conglomerate. There was no ERP software to run a business. They had to invent it themselves because they were the market, right? There wasn't a market that was selling software to them, but that market evolved. It was introduced, and now look at the space that we're in today, working in enterprise software. I think we're in that early stages today where this is a really immature, untapped market, and so a lot of customers are having to build. So if you look at things like distribution warehouses at Amazon, all the connected machinery that they have, pick, pack, and ship robots, conveyor belts, and so on, all that is connected, but it is very Amazon-centric, right? They built it to spec specifically to Amazon's needs based on that, right? They are firmly in that build because there's no opportunity to buy out there in the market, not yet at least.
Yeah, and I think the warning that we are giving is there isn't a product called Industry 4.0. There isn't a SKU say, I'm buying Industry 4.0. Because Industry 4.0 is more a theme, maybe what you were saying, or a blueprint, or a goal, but that comprises a lot of solutions, right? There is a lot of solutions in this, theme of Industry 4.0. People think that, I can go and buy Industry 4.0. There isn't. And that because of that, then you have a lot of challenges, right? Because then no matter who you talk, either is a software vendor or a big SI, and they're gonna come with this complicated puzzle of all kind of solutions that people really don't think like, yeah, can I deploy this very quickly? Can I take advantage of this? It's way too complicated, right? So that I think the problem in Industry 4.0, first of all, that it is in infancy. People think it's something that I can buy. It's not. It's just yet another blueprint of a solution, but there is a lot into that solution.
So, I'm curious, Rick, what your opinion is on this, but actually a term that fell out of favor a couple of years ago, before people were calling it Industry 4.0, they were calling it the fourth industrial revolution because there have been three behind us, right? And this is a revolution. This isn't like you said, Massimo, a SKU that you can buy. It's a ready-to-go product. This is a revolution of new technologies. Mm-hmm. So things like the cotton gin, it wasn't just the cotton gin. It was the entire span of period after that time in terms of automation, machinery, equipment, and development, right? And that's why they were calling this the fourth industrial revolution. That's evolved to Industry 4.0 because it's much nicer on a banner when you go to a conference. But really, it is a theme because it's a revolution, and revolutions, they're not overnight, right? Well, I guess revolutions are overnight. Evolutions are.
Can be. It can be. It can be.
Yeah, but Rick, what do you think about it? What do you make of all of it?
I think that the thought of it being this industrial revolution sort of centers, or at least my opinion is, sort of centers around everyone thinks that everything's going to turn to full robotics, right? Full robotics on the ground, minimizing the amount of workers in the pure manufacturing sense, which to a certain degree is true. That's expanded into the operations side, which is kind of obviously primarily where we kind of focus in our world. But what I'm seeing is that just like a lot of these advanced technologies, you see a lower adoption rate because it tends to be a piecemealed solution, right? So you've got look, we're centering in on like the IoT experience. I would argue it blends into other operational realms on, hey, how do I bring in automation and RPA into this equation too? Could that kind of fall into here? But I think the industry kind of centers it around how am I managing my manufacturing equipment for the most part, right? But I'm curious how, and we've seen this, how large organizations handle it differently than small organizations, and is there really a difference, right? So, I mean, we work with a lot of larger organizations that want to do everything themselves, invest the capital on each one of these different technologies, to where they may not want to go full AWS. They want the flexibility to, say, use a Kepware with certain types of devices and stream that up to an S3 bucket that they've got somewhere, right? But I'm curious, could we get to a point to where it does get more productized into something? We're never going to have, to your point, Massimo, a SKU for Industry 4.0. Mm-hmm. But right now, I tend to struggle a little bit, and hence why we're having this call. I tend to struggle a little bit on what are the barriers around Industry 4.0. And I think until there are strong barriers around what Industry 4.0 is from a company by company perspective, it's hard to make progress. It's hard to make progress on something that's just an overarching theme and not necessarily a goal. A goal insinuates that there is an endpoint, a target, but Industry 4.0 doesn't really have that yet, I don't think, or at least in my opinion.
Yeah, I think there are a couple of problems, right? So first of all, because it's composed with different technologies, so Industry 4.0, if you see the playground, there is a lot of technologies that play and applications as well. Every time you're going to see a presentation, either for a software vendor or for a big SI, they're going to have all kind of, names, technologies, logos, oh, I'm going to do my Industry 4.0 in this way. So if you just research, and as a CIO, and you invite a couple of, guys, from different organizations, you're going to get confused because everybody's going to come with their own story and with their own logos of technologies to use. So you're not going to actually be informed or more wise, like, oh yeah, now I know what to do. Actually, you're going to be more confused. That's the first issue that you say that there is. The other barrier that there is, that even if you figure it out which technologies are going to use this technology for BI, this technology for big data, this technology for the AI, this technology for streaming. You have to blend, people try sometimes to use current technologies, like I'm going to use a traditional middleware, or I'm going to use a traditional data warehouse, or a BI stack, or connectors. And pretty soon people are going to figure it out that this technology aren't really built for a high volume, streaming type of data, for the Industry 4.0 use cases. And so what do? Then you are going to try to find a stack that will fulfill that. But that stack is actually almost a copy of a stack that you already have today for what you're running for integration, or for your data, or for your BI, or for your AI, right? So now all of a sudden your Industry 4.0 is going to bring in a totally new stack, a completely almost copy of it. And that's a big barrier, right? So, and people say, no, I don't want that. I want to try to use what I have today. But then what you have today isn't really per se suitable for that use case. And that's really the biggest challenge I'm seeing.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, too, I think you're getting a lot of blending of domains in this, too, right, Massimo? So, you may not have a fit for purpose solution for, IoT type streaming or data. But there are significant insights in how those IoT sensors correlate to product quality, or to, hey, maybe even your sales, because maybe you're not really testing product quality, but you're noticing trends in how sales has dipped off after some significant event that happened in your product recipe or whatever it might be. So it's really, I think we're all going through a significant change to understand that the domain of your data as an organization as a result of Industry 4.0 is significantly changing.
Yeah, and not only the domain, but where the data is. We have discussion with the customers like, what if the cloud is not available, or I'm not trusting the cloud, so they want something in the edge, right? So edge, it's this big thing, that everybody talks about edge, but can you afford edge? Do you have the skill sets and the money to run an edge solution? Because edge solution sounds something tiny, like a satellite and the mothership, something like that. But that satellite is actually a mothership, can become a mothership with a lot of data and a lot of compute that you need, and a lot of AI in the edge. And now you are back buying servers and hiring skill set and managing all this stuff. Because you now are, jump on this edge trend, right?
Yeah, I've noticed that. It almost feels like, Mike, what do you think about this? That it almost feels like it's counterintuitive to where a lot of this, hey, look, maybe it's just because, I'm not as experienced in this area, but it almost feels like we're moving backwards in some of the technology solutions in order to achieve some of these things. Is that right or wrong?
Well, with respect to edge, you mean in particular? It's like we go from, we're all on ground now, the push is to go to cloud, and we're back to ground again, right?
Yeah.
So, no, you know what I think that's what it seems like, right? Because early on in the days of cloud, everyone was making fun of it and saying, yeah, we were doing that with IBM mainframes in the 70s, right? So this whole cloud thing, I was doing it like 30 years ago or 50 years ago or whatever it is, right? But like, no, you don't remember. People were saying, what is the cloud and how is it any different than what mainframes were back in the day? Okay, yeah, now it's centralized in some other place, but fundamentally what's different? I think we've evolved past that point and we recognize the value of the cloud, the managed service offerings that these cloud vendors are providing, the scale that they're able to provide you, and the new novelty of services of what that translates into business value. And we're going to see the same thing with edge again. And I think a lot of people, they hear edge, they don't necessarily know what edge means. I like to think of it as like if you think about the U.S. Navy or any sort of national Navy, right, with submarines. Well, under operational circumstances, submarines have to dive and they have to be self-sufficient and have to have all the data, all the food, all the people, all the resources to maintain operational secrecy for a period of days, weeks, whatever it might be. And they're not going to be communicating with anyone via satellites, via any sort of communication mechanism. They are completely outside of the universe for that period of time where they can't communicate. And so that is an edge case where you think about, well, how do we get our software to work in those types of circumstances? How do we think about AI and machine learning? how do we create value or maintain value of the machine learning investments in those types of edge scenarios where these things are completely air gapped from the rest of the planet and all other humans and systems, right? And how do you still drive the value that everyone gets all around the world when they're connected, topside into those little edge cases over here? So I think, yeah, I mean, we're talking about putting systems back on-prem again, but it is for a very narrow slice of operationally sensitive, operationally unique use cases where you still blend the benefits of cloud and managed services and scale, but you're able to concentrate that provisioning to a very, very narrow endpoint that lives somewhere in an air-gapped environment. So I think it's, right now, people will try and wrap their head around it, but I think just like cloud, edge is going to be the same exact story, where it doesn't mean that we failed on the cloud front, and it doesn't mean that we failed and everything's going back on-prem. We're evolving. We're all constantly evolving, right?
Yeah, and I think, but the architecture is very important. So, for instance, if you have let's say you have a barcode scanning solution, right? Or you have machines that really gives data. And now people says, oh, but then if the cloud is out, I can get data out. So I need to, maybe you need to queue it, locally, in your edge solution, and then sync up with the cloud.
Yeah.
So thinking about the architecture is going to be important. So people always say, barcoding has to be always on the edge. Yeah, of course, because you're scanning it, but it can be also connected to the cloud. So it can be that architectural connection with the APIs has to be done in the proper way, that it knows I can't connect anymore to the cloud. I'll connect local service, and then it syncs up, right? So those are very important architectural changes that people have to do to work with both modes, actually.
That's a really good point, because I think from customer to customer, even on the same use case, there are differences. Like some customers may have the need to batch upload anomalies in some way, shape, or form because their operations are quite different from someone in the exact same industry, maybe even producing the exact same type of goods, right? But I think that's why there's no single one solution. But perhaps there are themes of different technologies that you can centralize on that can handle streaming, batch, whatever, right? And then the ability to process some insights in the cloud, but then be able to deploy that on-prem. When I say on-prem, I mean edge in some cases. But what are those? Are there technologies that can help manage or centralize a lot of this, call it 4.0 space? Or is it going to continue to be somewhat ad hoc because the requirements are such a moving target?
Yeah, I think it's going to be ad hoc, but there are some technologies that will emerge. That certainly I believe that there are a lot of them. So if you take the traditional middlewares, right? So the traditional middleware was built to do app-to-app integration. Very simple. I publish an XML document or a JSON document. It goes through a middleware, goes to another application, right? And it's really built to do these things. If you take the same middleware and you say, now you're going to have 100 machines, is going to flood you with 1 billion messages. Can you handle it? Probably not. Not because of the scale, but because there is no resonance or not importance to every single message in a machine, right? Well, a business document, every business document is important, but it's just 100,000 business document or 1 million, but not 1 billion like a machine can generate. So you need a different technology. Now, the very funny thing is that in the different technology, you need the technology that can move data from the originator to a storage. So more like a data management type of technology, which you would transfer data. So you're not really integrating data between applications, but now you are transferring data. So what I believe that technology is going to really take over the middlewares in the future. If you build a transferring data, like I can transfer billion of messages, the same technology can be built to transfer also a business object document or a sales order, whatever, from app to app, which would be a Mickey Mouse use case for this data transfer technology because they can handle a lot of volume. So I see that this is one of the future of the middlewares. And then the endpoint will be not a queue, but more a data lake. So queues are going to be much smaller and not really becoming something big. And the data lake become a big queue for this type of, high volume. And so if you have this middleware that can do high volume data transfer, if you have an endpoint data lake, and why you need that? Because there's a cheap and available and service, because then you can use downstream for BI and AI and process intelligence. And then I think the last thing that we need is streaming analytics. So the traditional BI was like I do ETL to a data warehouse, and then I can go to my analytics and load the dashboard data that came in maybe last night or last week, doesn't matter. For analytics, it's okay that it's not really real time. But now if you see on the shop floor, you see really these operational dashboards that are real time, updated every time a reading comes in. People want that now on the analytics side as well. So you need, once that is at rest in the data lake, actually it's not the endpoint, it's a between point, but the endpoint is the consumer, the app, the analytics, the RPA or the automation, if you have an automation connected, or the process intelligence where you see the bottlenecks, right? So, but you need that end-to-end real time or near real time. If you don't have that and you use traditional technology, you're going to have a problem.
So you got me thinking here. You got actually my mind racing, Massimo, because I really love those examples, and I like the point about the data lake and the data storage. But increasingly, we're working with products that are generating tens of thousands of events every single second, and now you're onboarding more applications and devices and things that are generating just as much, if not more, data. And it's not just about the delivery; it's also storage mechanisms that can handle that and deliver you insights and intelligence. Once it's been landed, you can process that. But increasingly what we're seeing is that we have to introduce control planes that understand all the data that's actually moving and in flight. Because it's like a giant electron cloud of electrons bumping into each other and data being generated and everything. Increasingly, we need to start thinking about, products are sending data. That data goes to things like data lakes. But as data is in flight or moving around or being exchanged between systems, we still need to use that data while it's mid-flow to make assessments and, like you said, streaming analytics and so on. And the example that you gave kind of reminded me of Apple AirTags that just came out. And I think this actually has a pretty strong parallel to the whole topic of Industry 4.0. Because if you think about it, Apple's been selling iPhones, iPads, all sorts of iDevices and Mac devices and so on for years now. And in the last two generations of especially their iPhone or iProducts, they've been equipping it with a lot of technologies that only now we're just starting to realize what the value of. But they've effectively created a network or a hive of 1 billion different devices all around the world, such that if I lose a device or something of mine, if someone happens to be walking by with an iPhone or an iPad, it beams me information about where my device is, my backpack that I left on a train or a bus or whatever it might be. And all this data is flowing around. People are walking by, right? And they're reading the tag. They're sharing information with the tag and so on. It's just information being exchanged. But when Mike Kalinowski says, I just lost my backpack, let's go ahead and find it. All of a sudden, that network is operationalized into helping me find where I lost my device. It creates this hive. It's this hive of information being exchanged and use cases ad hoc presenting themselves, like me losing something, and all of a sudden just tapping into and delivering some sort of insight or asking a question and actually getting something live from that network back, right? I mean, this is where I think Apple has done a really tremendous job here, but I think there are some parallels to what Apple has done, that network that they've effectively built just through selling cell phones, mobile phones. So who says cell phones anymore? And what you're able to do with that breadth and depth of information that's just constantly circulating all around us with iPhones in our pockets walking down the street, right?
Yeah, but the one scary technology in Industry 4.0 that we have mentioned a couple of them is rules engine. That scares me a lot because people are putting rules engine in the ingestion flow and they want to evaluate, is this a faulty message? Is this something? And then launch a workflow, launch, an alert. But are rules engines, the way they are built the last 10 years, the right technology to put at this flooding of billion of messages and getting them evaluating yes, no, yes, no, yes, no, right? So that scares me a lot, because I don't think we have yet rules engine that can do that. And then you can think about why is a pre-configured rules engine has to say yes or no. Why can AI can be put at the ingestion APIs and have an intelligent model and say yes or no, right? So if you see the blueprint of Industry 4.0, everybody's looking for a rules engine. And I'm thinking about, people are talking about AI these days, and we're looking for a rules engine. So it scares me a lot as well, that part. I didn't figure it out. I know that people are using that, but I don't know if there is a really good fit in the long term. I haven't seen this rules engine and ingestion at a big scale working yet. At least myself, I haven't seen it.
I would say to that, though, I think the problem isn't in the rules engine. It's what you do when the rules are met or the conditions are met. So if I push in billions of events into a system and my rules are going off and we're setting off workflows and alarms and monitors to people saying, hey, this is going on, and now I've got an inbox full of 1 million messages, am I any more informed about what's actually happening? Or now am I contending with a completely different problem? I'm being informed. I have no idea how to make sense of any of this information, right? So is the problem the rules engines, or is it what happens after that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think both, actually. It's a good point. I mean, the rules engine, every time evaluates an alert, you're going to make 1 billion alerts in your inbox. I mean, then you really don't know what to do, right? So, but I don't know if rules engine has been built with a scalable architecture to getting a flooding of 1 billion messages and say yes or no, right? So I don't know, maybe. And so that's why I think that in the case of BI, traditional BI, traditional middlewares, we have figured out that we need a streaming, middleware, for big data transfer. We are figuring out that we need streaming analytics. Do we need a streaming rule engine as well, or are we still using the old rules engine? That's the thought process that I'm going through, that I haven't figured it out yet.
You just tell me what's the roadmap.
Well, and also on the ML side, Massimo, I'm sitting here thinking about, okay, we're talking about billions of readings perhaps every minute, right?
Yeah.
And if you're hitting an inference point at that sort of velocity, that bill for something machine learning, because we talk about, you can scale things. That's not necessarily the issue, but you even hit limits, say in AWS and Azure, even with that today. That's very costly, right? Mm-hmm. So how far can we take that? Because that ultimately makes us decide which direction that we're going, I think.
Yeah. Oh, and then you see also people we talked about in another podcast across clouds, let's build now an Info.0 blueprint, but then let's do some pieces in AWS, some pieces in Google, and some pieces in Azure, right? That's really a recipe for disaster. I mean, that I don't see that. And that's why sometimes my frustration is that I see these old PowerPoint architects coming, and telling, this is the Industry 4.0 architecture. But yeah, on PowerPoint, everything works, right? So by reality, does this really work? And so my call to the CIOs, don't buy into the PowerPoint architect, really validate piece by piece in the architecture, in the solution, and also validate the flow of the data of input and output, almost like a basic computer science 101. Every component will have an input and an output. Are you using the right data, the right integration style, the right volume? Can you scale this piece? Maybe you don't need the other piece. You don't need to scale, but the other one you need to scale. It's Industry 4.0, an implementation of that. It's today still in infancy and can be very complicated, right? And so my call to the CIOs: don't buy into PowerPoint architectures, because those will always work. But in reality, probably that doesn't work. So you have to figure it out. And the other second thing is try to really merge and connect the business data with your operational data, your machine data, because that is where the biggest outcome will come for you. You used to call it years ago sensor to boardrooms, right? So sensor readings have a meaning in the boardroom if you connect them to also with the business data.
Yep, absolutely. But an interesting field nonetheless, something that's going to continue to mature, and I would argue is something in theme and principle is going to continue to bleed into other industries. But guys, I appreciate the time today. And like I mentioned earlier, hopefully there's something in the near term future, 2, 3, 4 months from now, that we're going to get around a round table make Josh's producing job even harder when we do all this together. But guys, appreciate it. Thanks for joining again, and we'll see you next time.
All right.
See you
guys.